The sky darkened as alien warships cast long shadows over the land. The air vibrated with the deep hum of their engines, an unnatural presence against the harsh, wind-swept plains below. The inhabitants of this world had seen storms, quakes, and predators beyond imagination, but this was something new, something worse. A voice, metallic and commanding, echoed from the ships. Translated into the native tongue, it was a simple, absolute decree. Surrender. Compliance ensures survival. Resistance is futile. The Deathworlder stood alone, watching. Their world was not a paradise. It never had been. Life here was forged in struggle, tempered by hardship, and defined by the refusal to break. The planet itself was a crucible, and those who lived upon it were the steel that had been hardened 1,000 times over. The envoy arrived, a figure of arrogance clad in armor polished to a reflective gleam. They did not walk so much as glide, hovering above the uneven ground as if repulsed by the dirt beneath them. Flanking them were guards, tall, sinewy beings with sleek weapons, their fingers resting lightly on the triggers. The Deathworlder remained motionless as the envoy spoke. The words were as predictable as the wind before a storm. They spoke of subjugation, of order, of the benevolence of the empire that had come to claim what was rightfully theirs. 100 worlds had fallen before them. 100 species had bowed. Then, silence. A pause for the inevitable answer. The Deathworlder met the envoy's gaze, unflinching, unwavering. The word came, quiet yet thunderous in its finality. No. A flicker of disbelief crossed the envoy's face. No hesitation. No bargaining. No desperate plea for mercy. Just a single word, absolute and immovable. The envoy recalculated, as if they had misheard, as if they had not understood the meaning behind it. You do not understand the consequences, they said, voice laced with condescension. Your resistance will accomplish nothing. A slow breath. The Deathworlder tilted their head slightly, considering. Then, with the same quiet certainty. No. The guards stiffened. One shifted, ready to act, but the envoy raised a hand, restraining them. They would not lower themselves to violence. Not yet. This is not bravery, the envoy continued, irritation seeping into their words. This is defiance without cause. There is no path for you but submission. The Deathworlder took a step forward. Not aggressive, not fearful. Just, present. As if they had already decided the outcome of this encounter. The wind howled between them, the only sound in the waiting silence. Finally, the envoy exhaled, shaking their head. A hand lifted, fingers moving in a subtle signal. The guard stepped back, and the ship's engines rumbled once more. This will not end here, the envoy warned. The Deathworlder watched them retreat, unmoved. They already knew that. The second arrival was different. No grand declarations, no idle threats, just action. Warships loomed overhead, their weapons hot, their patience gone. The first bombardment targeted the outskirts, leveling empty structures, turning rock into glass. The ground burned, the air choked with dust. A final show of power before they took what they came for. From the largest ship, a squad deployed, more elite, more disciplined. No hesitation in their movements, no arrogance in their approach. This was not a warning. This was an execution. The Deathworlder watched them come. Their leader, taller than the last, bore no symbols of rank, only the quiet authority of someone who had never failed. Their voice was steady, flat. You had your chance. Now you will be erased. No response. The leader raised a hand, signaling the attack. The soldiers moved as one, weapons raised, ready to fire. No openings, no gaps. A perfect machine of war. But machines could break. The Deathworlder moved, not with speed alone but with purpose. The first soldier never saw the strike coming, an impact to the side of their helmet, a twist that sent them crashing into their own. Shots fired, wild and erratic as the formation unraveled. Another step, another strike. A rifle ripped away, turned, used against its former owner in a single fluid motion. Armor cracked, bodies fell. The leader cursed, stepping back, recalculating. This wasn't resistance. It wasn't rebellion. It was control. The Deathworlder fought without wasted movement, without hesitation. Each strike was meant to disable, disarm, destroy, not through sheer power, but through understanding. Their enemy relied on tactics, on predictability, on overwhelming force. But when the pattern broke, when the enemy did not react as expected, the machine faltered. The leader switched tactics, drawing a blade, abandoning the failed distance of ranged combat. A duel, fast and brutal. Their strikes were precise, practiced, each one enough to kill. The Deathworlder dodged, deflected, redirected. Not once did they retreat. Then, an opening. A moment too brief to notice, except to someone trained to see it. A hand caught the leader's wrist, twisting the weapon free. A knee to the chest, a sharp exhale of pain. The fight was over before the leader hit the ground. The remaining soldiers hesitated. The Deathworlder stood over their fallen commander, the stolen blade resting against their throat. A warning. A choice. The soldiers chose retreat. Scrambling, dragging their wounded, they fled back to their ship. The leader, still gasping for breath, locked eyes with the Deathworlder. No plea, no words, just silent disbelief. The Deathworlder stepped back, letting them go. Not out of mercy. The ground shook as the invasion began in earnest. No more warnings, no more demonstrations, only war. Ships descended like falling stars, disgorging soldiers in formations too precise, too practiced. Drones hovered overhead, scanning, tracking, calculating. The sky itself seemed to darken under the weight of their presence. The Deathworlder stood at the heart of it all, unflinching. The first wave moved in perfect synchronization, an unbreakable wall of bodies and firepower. Their weapons hummed with lethal energy, aimed and ready. This time, there would be no speeches. No ultimatums. Only silence. The Deathworlder struck first. A blur of movement, faster than their sensors could track. The closest soldier collapsed before their weapon could fire, the impact sending them crashing into the others. Gunfire erupted, but the Deathworlder was already gone, weaving through the chaos like a force beyond comprehension. Explosions rippled across the battlefield, not from the invaders, but from their own misfires. Their precision became a weakness, their reliance on formation a flaw. The Deathworlder did not fight with predictable patterns or calculated responses. They fought with something the invaders could not understand. Instinct. A drone fired, a burst of plasma meant to incinerate anything in its path. The Deathworlder ducked beneath it, twisting through the wreckage, seizing a fallen weapon in one fluid motion. A single shot, expertly placed, sent the drone crashing into the ranks below. The line broke. The invaders hesitated. For the first time, they hesitated. Their entire doctrine was built on overwhelming power, on psychological dominance. They had never encountered a species that did not fear them, that did not crumble at the sight of their fleets. The Deathworlder did not crumble. A voice crackled through the comms, urgent, shaken. Orders to regroup. Reinforcements inbound. The command ship loomed in the distance, a behemoth of metal and malice, its cannons shifting to end the battle in one decisive strike. The Deathworlder looked up, exhaled, and moved. Through the chaos, through the bodies, through the storm of fire and fury. Each step was calculated, not by logic, but by something deeper. The ship's targeting systems locked on, its engines glowing with the power of 1,000 conquered worlds. And yet, as the Deathworlder reached its base, scaling its metal hide with nothing but sheer will, they did not see an unstoppable machine. They saw weakness. A single breach. A single flaw in the armor of an empire too arrogant to believe one person could stand against it. The ship's cannons charged, its crew blind to the inevitable. By the time they realized, it was already too late. The explosion tore through the sky, the command ship systems failing in cascading destruction. The remaining forces faltered, their coordination shattered. Panic. The Deathworlder stood amid the wreckage, watching as the impossible unfolded. The invaders were breaking. The battle was no longer about territory. It was no longer about conquest. It was about fear. Theirs. Smoke curled into the sky, thick and heavy with the scent of burning metal. The battlefield was silent now, except for the distant echoes of retreating ships. The invaders were leaving. Not because they had been outgunned. Not because they had been overwhelmed. Because they had been broken. The Deathworlder stood amidst the wreckage, unmoving. Bodies lay scattered, not all of them alien. Their own wounds bled freely, but they paid them no mind. Pain was secondary. Survival was absolute. The remaining soldiers scrambled to evacuate, their once perfect formations now disorderly, frantic. They had never lost before. Not like this. Not to one. A signal pulsed across the sky, a desperate call from the fleet. Stand down. Fall back. Regroup. There would be no victory here. The Deathworlder watched as the last of them vanished beyond the clouds, their once dominant presence reduced to fading lights in the atmosphere. They would return to their empire, to their rulers who had never conceived of such defiance. They would speak of this place, of this moment, of the one who had said no. Whispers would spread. Fear would fester. Not of armies, not of war machines, but of the idea that somewhere, out in the vast cold dark, there existed those who would not bow. The Deathworlder exhaled, turning from the battlefield. There would be no celebration. No declarations of victory. Just another day survived. But across the stars, something had changed. 100 conquered worlds stirred, hearing rumors of an empire that had met resistance and recoiled. Of a force they could not break. Of the single word that had shattered the illusion of their invincibility. No. And for the first time in an age, the empire knew what it felt like to be afraid.